What are the 7 different dimensions of optimization that learning and mastering can assist you in becoming the best version of yourself while you're single or when you're in a relationship as well? Find out today. Let's hit it. What's up, everybody? My name is Dr. Phoenix Singh. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Today, what I'd like to speak with you about is a topic that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I've explored for years in terms of my own life, and now it is a real blessing for me to be able to share it with you in hopes that it can resonate in some regard and hopefully assist you as well in your journey to being the best version of yourself. Before we get started, please do like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell so you get notifications every time that we post new original content. You can also follow me at these social media accounts down here. All right, so to be able to give you some background, when I moved to Israel, I was something called a Fulbright Scholar, a Fulbright Senior Scholar, which means that I was a college professor, and I was very lucky. The U.S. government provided me with a grant, which allowed me to be able to go, and I was at the Faculty of Law at the University of Haifa, which is in Haifa, Israel, which is in the northwest. Beautiful city. Highly recommend visiting if you can. For those of you who are biblical scholars, they've got Mount Carmel there. They've got, the cave that supposedly Elijah, hid in after the whole, Jezebel thing with the false prophets. So that's pretty cool. If you are a fan of gardens or you happen to be of the Baha'i faith, there's just the most beautiful Baha'i gardens in Haifa. I think that you would just absolutely love it if you went there. And the people are tremendous. Now, while I was there, I moved there literally 2 weeks after the official sale of my first company that I formally sold through mergers and acquisitions. And it was a time in my life where I think I needed a lot of healing. I think I needed a lot of spiritual healing. I wanted to be a lot closer to God than I was. I'd definitely been putting my faith on the back burner, and I really wanted to reconnect. And there was so much spiritual healing that took place when I moved to Haifa, when I was living in Israel. And first time that I ever read the Bible cover to cover. And, the coolest part for me was, you're reading about Nazareth, you're reading about Sodom, whatever it is. You get into your car, you drive. I mean, it's a tiny country. To be able to drive from Eilat all the way in the south, all the way up to Dan, all the way in the north, maybe like 7 hours. Right? It's such a small country, so to be able to take those day trips was a phenomenal experience for me in terms of, my spiritual life and my faith. But during my time there, I had to take a really cold, hard look at my life. And this is something that all of us have to do in our lives, and it is terrifying. It is so much easier for us to be able to judge others, to be able to numb ourselves to our own weaknesses, and in some cases even to disregard our strengths and those gifts that God has given us by essentially just numbing ourselves, using all sorts of different things. We use work, we use alcohol and drugs, we use sex and relationships, we use so many different things that essentially, get us away from our ability to optimize ourselves, which of course is what God deeply desires for us. And so what I found was that after just months of prayer and just trying to eke out the marrow of the human experience to figure out what are the different areas that if we kind of listed them out would provide us with a comprehensive list, a comprehensive picture of ourselves as human beings, such that we actually have a template that we can work off of to become the best versions of ourselves. Now, as someone, so I'm 33 right now, right? So I'm currently single. I can tell you that it is so much easier to focus on yourself, on personal development when you are single than when you are in a relationship, particularly a long-term relationship. It is just so much easier. So I believe that it is such a blessed time in your life, that it is truly a blessing from God to be single. Be that until you are 18 years old or until you are 80 years old, right? Not only is there nothing wrong with being single, it is a huge blessing to be single. If anybody thinks that being in a relationship somehow makes your life much easier in the aggregate, etc. No. All it does is that it shifts problems around, right? We're shuffling, right? You end up getting a whole new batch of totally different problems you didn't have when you were single. And a lot of things that you had the opportunity to do when you were single, you no longer have the opportunity to do, or if you have the opportunity, it would be irresponsible. I've made another video for you all on this channel, which has to do with essentially the development of lists of assets to acquire. I call them asset lists, things to purchase, experiences to have, etc. while you're single. And it's one of the many reasons why being single is a wonderful, blessed, and very happy time, if you allow it to be. If you allow God to truly be what God is, which is the source of true sustainable joy, you'll realize that you do not need a relationship to feel constantly loved, constantly satisfied, and happy in this life. Sometimes it's almost like we desire to stay broken in that regard, to stay unfulfilled, almost as a challenge to God. And we say, God, if you really, it's almost like a threat. God, if you loved me, you would give me a partner. What are you talking about? That's really not a good thing to be able to say. It's also an empty threat. God's not going to say, oh, well, Phoenix really, he taught me a lesson there. That's not how this works. By tapping into God, you'll really realize that whether you're single for one more day or for the rest of your life, you can be identically happy as being in a relationship, being married, or having children. I truly, truly believe that, have experienced it, and have spoken with so many Christians who, that is their life, and they're just the happiest people that I know. It's such a wonderful thing, right? So these are the 7 different areas that, again, if you're in a relationship, you're still going to be working towards optimizing these things. But I do believe it's a lot easier to do when you're single. And I think it's a real shame to not take the time to work towards optimizing these things when you have that time in your single life, okay? I think it sets a firm foundation. I think it helps you to get to know yourself better. And as you get to know yourself better, you can also start setting stronger boundaries in terms of the things that you will and will not put up with in the context of a romantic relationship. For example, the first dimension we're going to talk about is physical health. And so if your physical fitness is of the utmost importance to you, if you have a partner who is hypercritical that you wake up at 4 a.m. every morning to be able to go for a run, if they're, making fun of it or saying, God, can't you just sleep in for one day? Or something like this, totally unnecessary, you will have a boundary to set. As opposed to essentially just saying, well, my partner wants it, and, happy wife, happy life, or, well, it would make my husband happy. So, I guess I'll change what I love and what makes me passionate, even though it's not impacting the relationship or the other person, or frankly, anybody else. Then it's none of their business. It's really not. This really is one of these things where if you're truly passionate about something, it gives you joy, it makes you the best version of yourself, and it doesn't negatively impact your partner or anyone else in your life, you should be encouraged to do that thing because it's making you the best version of yourself. And sometimes your partners aren't going to know that unless you tell them. It's very important that you be explicit about this. And if a boundary is crossed, that you very lovingly, and we'll talk about boundary setting in other videos on this channel, but when we do try to set those boundaries, that we do it in a very tactful and a deeply loving way. We want it to be like our giving feedback is like taking a flashlight and shining it on the path which helps our partner to follow it. We don't want to shine it in their eyes in an aggressive sense, which kind of blinds them and makes them almost aggressive, right? Because of how strong that is. We don't want that, okay? Now, confrontational that is. We don't want that. So, number 1 is physical health, right? This is an area of optimization. Now, statistically speaking, because you guys know that given my background as a professor and in the research literature, I really deeply care about what the literature says. There are definitely different morphological characteristics, kind of what you look like, which can optimize yourself when it comes to your physical attractiveness. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear that, and as someone who, for the preponderance of my life, was quite overweight as soon as 2 years ago, I was 70 pounds heavier than I am now. My waist size right now is a 32 inches, and I was a 45 right? I still have the pants upstairs. You know, I look like one of these guys in a commercial or something, holding these big old pants up. And I never thought I would ever be able to get back into shape. And I can tell you, I didn't get back into shape because, you know, I wanted to be more attractive per se, even though that obviously was something that came with the territory of weight loss, specifically fat loss, and building muscle. But it was something where I was having all kinds of health problems, right? And obviously, you know, God has given us these bodies. We really need to make sure that we take good care of them. And a part of that is what we're fueling ourselves with, meaning eating nutritious food and recognizing the toxicity and addictiveness of things like refined carbohydrates, which I deeply, deeply believe that it's an addiction, just like drugs and alcohol, just like pornography, etc. Refined carbohydrates are deeply addictive. Refined sugars, for instance, fast food, etc. There's a whole research literature and patent literature, etc., that is all about maximizing the addictiveness of food. Remember that anytime you go out to eat, anytime you go to the majority of restaurants, their job is not to make the food as nutritious as possible. Their job is to bring you back again. It's to want you to come back to the restaurant. And the best way that they can do that is essentially by making the food as tasty as possible. And there's all kinds of ways for them to do this and for them to maximize the tastiness of the food, which sounds crazy, right? But it's something where their job is to reinforce you. So don't think that, you know, these restaurants you go to, even when they say it's a healthy option, that it's necessarily as healthy as you choosing, to the extent possible, organic food and trying to eat healthy as much as possible. Same thing when it comes to going to the gym. Now remember, when it comes to weight loss, in another video I'll share my weight loss journey, and I'll tell you about, you know, how I lost 70 pounds and, you know, got down from over 40% body fat to under 15% body fat. But it's the case where physical exercise, it releases endorphins. It does so much for us, right? It makes us look better. It helps us to sculpt ourselves. We can build lean muscle mass, which in and of itself is going to increase our basal metabolic rate and help us burn more calories. But no matter how many calories we burn in the gym, it is something where our diet is the keys to the kingdom. They always say that, like abs, like six-pack, that abs aren't made in the gym, they're cooked in the kitchen, right? They're made in the kitchen. That's what it is. Nutrition is really the key to most things. And as the years go by, the research literature is getting clearer and clearer about the link between gut health and mental health. So it is more and more important, as this literature comes out, that we take care of ourselves physically. And to be able to establish those healthy routines in terms of diet and exercise, I do recommend getting some kind of a fitness tracker. I have an Apple Watch. I love that. I thought that was going to be the stupidest thing, I gotta be honest with you. When I got it, I'm like, I'm not going to use this thing. Nah, it's a few $100s. I don't really need it. Thing totally changed my life. And also on my iPhone, I kind of write down calories as I eat them, right? And I try to weigh out food with food scales. Seems like a huge hassle. It takes like 30 seconds. It's really worth the time. It's really worth tracking it because you can just see phenomenal changes. And it is true that, you know, statistically, like let's talk about for guys, like for men, the ideal waist to hip ratio is 9 to 10. For women, it's 7 to 10. This is why, think about things like Coca-Cola bottles. Coca-Cola bottles, 7 to 10 waist to hip ratio in terms of when you look at the thing, right? That may sound insane, but it's totally true, right? Even when you take a look at people in the body positivity movement who have they're larger, right? In terms of their BMI is larger, right? That just like I was higher BMI before, but their waist to hip ratio is still dead on. They will be perceived to be more physically attractive. And you can get these waist to hip ratios effectively by, if you don't already have it, by losing fat and by systematically lifting weights, right? In addition to that, by losing fat, etc., you can get to body fat rates which really show higher levels of musculature in different body areas that the opposite sex perceives to be really the highest predictors of physical attraction. So for example, when it comes to men, right? So what do women find attractive? So over 40% for women, it's the butt. right? So it's the glutes, and we'll talk about in other evolutionary videos on this channel why that is, right? And after that, it's the legs and it's the chest. All of these areas can be toned, but the toned muscles themselves are not really going to start popping until, and really being defined unless we cut down on the body fat. So that's the reason to be able to do that. So that's number one. Optimizing your physical health through routine diet and exercise and making those things habits in your life that are sustainable. The second dimension of optimization is your mental health. Now, this is something where, the preponderance of individuals in their lives, especially, here in North America, we got a great large-scale epidemiological literature on behavioral health. And we know that the preponderance of individuals are going to experience some kind of depressive anxiety, some sort of mental health issue at some point in their life. The lifetime prevalence is very high. So keeping that in mind, having some kind of a mental health issue is not something that means that you can't find a partner. It's not something where it's like, that in and of itself means that, you're the least attractive person or anything like that. Don't think about that. Really, the important thing to understand is that we can optimize our mental health by having the right people around us, by essentially dealing with everything else in terms of the 7 dimensions, by being physically healthy, by having a job that we feel fulfilled at, by being financially stable and having good spending and saving habits. All of these things are going to lead to a real sense of predictability, so stability. And that's a major predictor in terms of our success when it comes to our mental health. Now, if it is something where you have a mental health problem, and when it comes to certain conditions, like things like schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder, etc., the biological link here is not only undeniable. A lot of people would say that it's almost like, like breaking your ankle, right? You would never shame someone, says, oh, your ankle's broken, deal with it or whatever, just walk it off. What a ridiculous thing to say, right? Stop complaining, there's nothing wrong with you. It's all in your head, it's all in your foot, right? Whatever we would say. That's not the case. These are biological conditions, okay? And biology and our genetics interact in unique ways. And one way is mental illness, right? Is this gene by environment interaction makes us more or less likely to experience mental illness when we have significant stressors in our life to be able to trigger the symptoms. Be that something, for example, like a breakup or loss of a loved one, getting fired from a job, a financial crash, whatever it is. These things can be triggers that if we have a genetic predisposition to a mental health issue, that is really going to be almost the thing that pulls the trigger, as it were. If you have the biological predisposition, it's like cocking the gun, and then pulling the trigger is the major stressor. All of a sudden we see the symptomatology of a mental illness manifest itself. So when it comes to mental health issues, right, it is something where it's important that we actively manage them. There is still a stigma, and there should not be, about seeking help, going to therapy, taking pharmaceuticals, right, so psychopharmacology. It is something where at the end of the day, this is about management. This is about also in the process getting to know yourself better, knowing your unique stressors and triggers, etc. You can get to know yourself so much better through going to therapy. I highly recommend it. Regardless of whether it's something where you're in crisis or you just really want to explore yourself better, going to see a therapist, having a coach, etc., to explore your life with and the mechanics of your life can be one of the most immensely fulfilling things that you can do. So I highly recommend just going to be able to see a mental health professional and really working to structure your life in a way that optimizes your mental health. Now, if you end up dating someone and you find out in the course of dating them that they are on, let's say, what's called SSRI, an antidepressant. It stands for a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, right? Which, if you'd like, comment below. I can explain what that is in another video and how that works. And if you would like to learn about certain things when it comes to dating people with different mental health problems, let me know too, and we can chat about that in another episode. But at the end of the day, if you find out that they're on a certain medication or that they have a history of depression and these things, and you've never experienced a mental health problem, I understand that can be alarming or even a little bit scary, especially because it threatens the concept of stability and security. And these are really the things that men and women seek out in relationships. Women seek security, men seek stability. And both genders obviously care about both, right? But that's just kind of what I'm talking about, generally speaking here, is that men place more of an emphasis on seeking stability and women on security. And obviously finding out that your partner may have a mental health issue can be really scary. I find it best to be able to have, a very calm and collected conversation with your partner, about that, and kind of learning more about how you can be a support to them, because provided that the other individual in the partnership is actively managing their symptoms and is managing their triggers and makes you familiar with their triggers, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Relationship's going to be fine. And it's definitely something as well where it's going to help you get to know your partner at a deeper level. And it's really going to help them to be able to gain trust with you through that acceptance that you have. And you will feel closer to them if they truly trust you and open up to you about those things. Because a lot of people are very sensitive about discussing those kinds of issues. The third dimension of optimization has to do with your spiritual health. This doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you are a Christian or if you are an atheist or you are a Muslim or you are Jewish or you are a Buddhist or anything else. Exploring your spirituality, exploring the concept of something transcendent. Okay? And this could be a transcendent concept of, literally just the concept of structure. So I'm a huge Jordan Peterson fan. If you don't know who Jordan Peterson is, he does a great biblical series. One of the most genius guys. He's also a forensic psychologist. So, that's me as well. So he's a guy after my own heart. And I'm a big fan of him because he's like me insofar as he believes in leading with the literature and really supporting everyone, but really supporting young men, and I'm very passionate about mentoring and working with young men. I think that it's something that not enough people do these days, is talk about men, is talk about how do men optimize themselves, how can men be the best versions of themselves, etc. And I think that that's very important for men to be able to have strong mentors who truly love them and believe in them as men, to be able to promote masculinity and to be able to really say that there is not only nothing wrong with being a man and nothing wrong with masculinity, but it's such a beautiful thing that should be cherished. And if anything, we need more masculinity these days and not less. So I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. And Jordan Peterson talks quite a bit about the concept of God the Father as being a representation of structure, that worshiping God the Father is essentially the same thing as worshiping the concept of structure in life. And for all of us, this takes the form of responsibility. Taking responsibility for ourselves, for our lives. The way that I believe in that, even though Jordan doesn't talk about it, but I think it's a corollary to it, is the responsibility that we have to explore ourselves to the point where we know both our strengths but also our vulnerabilities, such that we can work on optimizing those. And in my opinion, one of the best ways to be able to do that is to be able to get in touch with our spirituality, to be able to establish that anchor in our lives, that transcendent anchor. So for me, it's Jesus. For other people, it's other things, and that's fine. It's wonderful, right? I truly, truly believe that by exploring your faith, that you will come away with a much deeper sense of purpose in your life. And that is going to drive you forward in so many different ways. And I'll talk about in another video that I'll put a card to and a link to in the description, which is essentially what I believe to be kind of the 4 keys to success in attraction and dating. And one of them is the prioritization of your faith, to be able to get that anchor with God or with whatever transcendent structure you worship, to be able to essentially get that set first, so you know who you are and that you are sufficiently grounded before you get grounded with other people. And ironically, that is essentially the cross itself. The 4th dimension of optimization is occupational and educational health, which also has to do with financials, basically, right? You will spend more time in the aggregate, right, with your work colleagues than you will with your own family. It is so important. They always say about picking a first job. I deal with a lot of grad students, understandably, and they're always going out on the job market, and they'll ask me, they'll say, Dr. Singh, what do I look for? And I'll always say, don't choose a job, choose a boss, especially for the first job, right? Choose the boss, choose the people you're working with. I advise undergrads the same thing. They want to go to graduate school. I say, look at the lab. Look at the people who are going to be kind of the people you'll interact with in the day-to-day. It's so important. If there is not a goodness of fit there, it could be the best university in the world. You don't want to go to that program. It will literally destroy you. It will psychologically and likely physically destroy you to do that to yourself. So you really need to really watch that. By establishing a goodness of fit between what you're good at and what you're passionate about. Trust me, there'll be a lot of things you're passionate about that you can't make a job out of, and a lot of things that you're really good at that you really are not passionate, you don't like it, right? It is a sweet spot to find the overlap there. And if I were to add another dimension, which would be what are your spiritual gifts, it really is kind of like that trinity, that triumvirate, right? That if you can find a sweet spot in the middle there, you are going to have a very, very sustainably joyful life. And as you'll hear me say a lot, I don't really believe in happiness per se. Happiness is fleeting. It's something that happens to us at different times in our life. What we should be shooting for is not happiness, it is sustainable joy. We don't need the fireworks, we need the slow and consistent burn, right, of that deep, deep sense of joy, right, of satisfaction with our lives. And there's a quote, I think it may be Albert Camus, I may be totally wrong on that, so don't quote me on it, but it's basically that something along the lines of, what is it, that the true definition of joy is, what is it, like congruence between a man and the life that he lives, or something like that. And I really do believe that, right? The closer you can come to I hate the phrase, live your truth. I hate that phrase. But the closer you can get to essentially living your life in a way that really espouses your values, these deep God-given values, the happier you're going to be. And obviously, getting a job that's like that may rest on credentials, including your education. So making sure that your educational health is sufficient for what brings you sustainable joy. You don't need a PhD to be happy. I have 2 PhDs, right? I know people who are miserable who are in situations like I am, and I know people like myself who are very deeply joyful to be where they are. But I also know people who have a high school degree or a CTE, continuing technical education degree, who are the happiest people that I know. It is not that getting more education necessarily makes you happier. It's not, right? But if education leads you to a place where you can actually have a life, where in terms of your occupational educational health, you're able to get to the middle of that Venn diagram, then go after it. Go after it with fervor. Go after it with dedication. And if you're afraid, if you feel imposter syndrome, the idea that, oh my gosh, I'm not that person to get the degree. Nobody in my family went to college, certainly didn't get a master's or a doctorate. You can be that person for your family. There always has to be a first. In every family, in every society, there has to be a first in your community, and that can be you. The 5th dimension of optimization is your social health, but specifically your social life's health when it comes to romantic relationships. This does not mean that if you do not have a partner, that you are, automatically at 1% social health or anything like that when it comes to romance. On the contrary, this is just an area of your life that by exploring it and optimizing it, you will end up finding that you are gaining greater sense of life satisfaction. And when it comes to your romantic health, it's important to focus on areas like opportunity. So providing yourself a significant enough amount of opportunity to meet people. So this could be going to small group, going to church, going to conferences, going to different kinds of events that churches put on, etc. And being able to really ensconce yourself with a good and supportive group of friends who are really encouraging you to be able to explore this area of your life. Never forget that just because you go out and everybody's in a relationship or nobody is your age, let's say, or you don't find anybody attractive in a different group, every person knows 10 people, okay? You should take advantage of that fact to be able to understand that everybody knows, or I can't imagine anyone who doesn't know some single people, some wonderful single friends. And who knows how you're going to meet your partner? Everybody in their head is this thing called the personal fable, which is, what you believe is the way that you're going to meet your partner. But the likelihood that it's going to happen exactly like you think is pretty low, right? Nobody is just like, I guarantee you, I remember when I was growing up, nobody was, looking at an Apple computer and saying, that's how I'm going to meet my future spouse. No way, right? But now, over 35% of all romantic couples in the United States, that's how they're meeting, is through online dating. Be they apps, be they websites like eharmonymatch.com, etc. So you don't want to limit yourself. And when I say limit yourself, I also mean to only limiting yourself to online dating. Even though we'll talk a lot on this channel about best practices when it comes to online dating and best practices when it comes to actually meeting people in person. But this is an area where if you're doing nothing in terms of your romantic life, if you're putting it off or saying it's not important, or if you're jaded, maybe you've had a really bad relationship, or for whatever reason you just feel really lost, or that nothing works out for you romantically, the worst thing you can do is just totally quit it. It's totally fine to take a break. There's really no problem with that. But when you take a break, focus on optimizing other areas, okay? But when you come back to it, make sure that you are, if nothing else, going about in a systematic way that is something that you're having fun with. Dating and relationships are supposed to be fun. If you're not having fun more days than not, something's up with the health of that relationship, okay? I'm just telling you that you need to explore deeper. But that is the fifth dimension in terms of optimization. The sixth dimension of optimization is social health again, but this is social life health when it comes to your family. And I'm not just talking about your parents and any siblings, I'm also talking about extended family, right? So maybe the cousins you haven't spoken to in a while, the aunts and uncles who, you don't pick up the phone, or, you don't send a gift at the holidays, or you don't, write cards to, or a postcard when you go somewhere, whatever it is. This is an area that we often overlook. Sometimes I get the sense that God's like a man with a big old umbrella, and he's just standing there, and obviously, it's a strong umbrella, strongest umbrella imaginable, right? So it's raining torrential downpour everywhere, but it's okay because you're warm and you're dry and you're safe and everything's good. And then eventually you feel so good, you feel so safe, that maybe you tap a foot outside, right? And it's wet, right? But you say, that's not that bad. So then progressively you start to go deeper into the rain until you're at such a point where you look back and you say, that's okay, because I can always go back. It can always be warm there. I can always be safe there. But the issue is that after a while, you spend enough time there, right? Your clothes start to get heavy with the water weight, right? And you start to get cold, and all of a sudden, you start shivering, and every single drop of water, of rainwater, is almost like a dagger stabbing into you. And you look back at the guy with the umbrella and you say, why aren't you protecting me, right? Why aren't you protecting me against this, right? And so what you have to do, though, because the thing is that the man with the umbrella didn't change. He was always stable in providing that warmth and that love, right? And the ironic thing is, if you take one step towards him, he's going to come, 5 steps towards you. That's the way that God works, right? God is always there, always available, always loving, always wants that relationship with you. It's only us, really, who kind of takes that step outside of the umbrella. God's not shoving us out of the umbrella, okay? So the thing is that when it comes to family, it can feel the same way. That family, for some of us not. Some of us have very complicated family relationships. But even if we have a stable family relationship, it can feel like that's our safe space, to the point where we basically, that's our anchor, right? At least on this earth, that's our, fleshly anchor, especially when we're single, is our family. Or our friends, which we'll talk about in a moment, but that's our family. And so when we start to go out, and maybe we forget to call, our parents once a week, maybe we, stop having close relationships with our siblings, etc., we think we can always come back to it. But almost like a plant that's not getting sufficiently watered, sometimes we look at it and it's withered, and we say, no, I didn't mean for that to happen. I didn't mean for that to kind of be neglected so much. It's almost like spinning plates. We have to come back and we have to water that plant. All right, it's very, very important that but it's important that we take a look in the mirror and that we recognize that. No one is out to shame you. No one is out to say that, you're wrong and you're bad, etc., for not calling such and such a person. It's not that at all. All it is that this is an area that if we optimize it, that we will be significantly more fulfilled in our lives. if we have complicated relationships with our families, I have a lot of friends who tragic stories of abuse, etc. This may not be something, right, where it's an area of optimization that necessarily is going to, without handling it very, very tactically, it's not something where you can just knock on the family's door and reestablish ties. That is much, much more difficult, all right? But if that's not the case for you, and it's simply something where you've lost touch, etc., it is a blessing that you recognize this and that you take that first step towards reestablishing contact and trying to rebuild those healthy social habits with your family. And same thing when it comes to taking one step. God takes 5 steps. God is going to honor that effort and make it significantly easier for you because God honors it and will support you in that endeavor, because you're doing it out of love and out of appreciation for Him as well. Because this is something that God desires for us, is for us to be able to have these close familial ties. So this is really a big area of optimization that oftentimes we don't think about, because just like the man with the umbrella, we feel like it's always safe. We'll always be able to come back to it. And finally, the 7th area of optimization has to do, again, with social health, except this has to do with our social lives in terms of our friends. In other words, platonic relationships, right? This is such an area. People say that, friends are the family that you choose. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I think that love for family and love for friends is different. But I do think that a solid friend group is essential. And not only kind of like a diverse friend group, which I think is very important, especially in terms of, gender relations, right? So guys having, friend groups that have platonic female friends, and women having friend groups where they're platonic male friends, especially when you're single. When you get married or into a deep relationship, those rules do shift a little bit, I'm just telling you. But it is something where it's very important for men to have a solid tribe of friends who are men, and for women to have a solid tribe of other friends who are women. That is absolutely critical. It should not be that you're a guy and you say, you know what, to your partner, you can't go out with your girlfriends, no, da-da-da-da-da. Unless it is somehow truly harming the integrity of the relationship. The female friends only want to go out to bars all the time, right? And maybe they get intoxicated every time they go, or they're posting things on social media that they shouldn't be posting in terms of photos from when they're going out, and whatever it is, if it's a truly bad influence like that. But if it's not, and you just kind of, miss the other person, want them to be at home all the time, if it is something that's fulfilling for them to spend time with their female friends, you need to really pray on it and really address your own issues to be able to make sure that that sense of loneliness that you have can be replaced by solitude with God or fellowship with your own friends, because that sense of independence between you and your partner is critical. Codependency is not healthy. Codependency is not something that God wants for us. It's not. So it is absolutely essential that we have and encourage our partners to be able to have these strong platonic relationships, all right? It can make for a significantly healthier relationship in the aggregate. And it's something where if we don't have many friendships like that, yeah, it's scary, but if we ourselves, if we're single, we don't have those relationships, the burden is on us to be able to go and explore those. But the blessing of being single is we have the time. We don't have to be at home at a certain point. Maybe our partner's love language is quality time. We don't have to worry about that when you're single, right? You can go and network all you want and stay out as many nights as you want, getting to know as many people as possible. Let's say you're very shy. I want you to push yourself about 1 to 5% a week. So let's say that you never go out. You just never go out. A 1% shift would be going out once every 2 weeks, right? And then after that, I want you to go out twice every couple of weeks, right? And we're just going to build it up. Obviously, you don't have to go out 7 days a week, but having a couple, maybe 2 or 3 different social outlets is a healthy thing. If your social skills are rusty, don't worry. A few years ago, I had that situation. My social skills were really rusty after I sold my company, and all of a sudden I wasn't working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. I had to reestablish those skills. It took a little while, but it was incredibly fulfilling to be able to get back into that habit of socializing, and I made just some of the best friends I've ever had in my life. It's such a blessing. And that platonic support and love from that friend group is something that's also going to sustain you in terms of that social outlet while you're single. And it's also something where, let's just say that you never happen to end up getting married or being in a relationship. Having a strong friend group is essential to be able to fulfill that social outlet function in addition to your family. So that is an area where you can always optimize more. So in closing, those are the 7 dimensions. To go through them again briefly: your physical health, your mental health, spiritual health, your occupational and educational health, and then 3 kinds of social health, right? Romantic, familial, and platonic. My recommendation to you is every 6 months to sit down by yourself, write down all 7, give yourself a score out of 100% how you think you're doing, and regardless of whether you're at 1% or 99%, to be able to give yourself 3 different action items that you're going to work on for the next, let's say, 6 months before you do it again. Make those 6 different steps truly practical, truly actionable, and things that really are going to lead you down the right path towards optimization in that particular dimension. That's my recommendation for you. I found it to be tremendously fulfilling, not only for myself, but also for my coaching clients and also for individuals in the faith that I've worked with for years now. All right, everyone, thank you so much for stopping by today. I hope that you have a wonderful week. Please do remember to like this video, share it with your friends and your congregation. Please do also comment below if you enjoyed this video. It really helps us with the YouTube algorithm such that we can get our message out to significantly more people. And if you have questions that we can answer in future videos, please place them down below as well. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching from me, you can sign up via the website below, and it would be a pleasure to work with you. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed that episode and you'd like to see more original content, then please do click on one of the links right here. I hope to see you in the next one.